10 points if you count all those little kickers. 8.
So we kept walking past that spot where we saw those trails coming out of that cattails, and along the rest of this field, which is beans right now where we're on, it was kind of barren of tracks, and then it started to get more and more and more. Also saw a couple boot tracks mixed in, and then we got to this back corner, we found a trail camera on one of these trees right in the corner of the field. So obviously we don't want to hunt right here because the sign isn't as hot and there's somebody else been back here. We got two options we're pursuing right now. One is we continue to go further to get to another type of field, see if it's fresher in terms of sign, or we can cut kind of into that swamp a little bit. The wind will be blowing wrong for some bedding, but not for others. And if we just kind of walk this edge, we'll be able to kind of evaluate the sign and then probably get into an area that's been less hit by other hunters. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards right now. We don't really have time to back up and drive to a different spot, so we're going to have to make do kind of the best we got right here. So we just came a little further down this edge, found a scrape, and a really heavy trail heading into this woodlot. Because the wind is blowing that direction, we can still come back to this, assuming the deer are bedding out that direction, which is what we kind of assume. We can keep walking this transition line, see if there's anything that looks better. If there is, we'll hunt it. If there's not, we can come back to this because our scent hasn't been blown in there. Mm-hmm. So we just got down into this riverbed, and up top here we had one little fresh rub where the woods kind of pinched down on the side of this riverbank. It's kind of a slow sweeping bend into an oxbow right there. And you can see where we're standing, it's just kind of this little higher riverbed, and it's got a lot of tracks on it. You can see a couple spots where the deer are crossing. It's not as clear exactly where they come up the hill on this side, but up on that ridge there was a couple of trails that kind of converged through that really tall grass, and a couple of trails that went right along the bank here. So, given the time, which to this point it's already after 5 o'clock, so we're running low on time, this is probably, I think, the better bet than going back and trying to hunt closer to the scrape, which was still closer to where we found that trail cam. We could get fresh deer coming across this river onto this side. Could be deer bedded on that oxbow. There's a bunch of kind of swamp out there that the deer could come through. So I think it's, even though it's hard to see because the ground's really dry, what's fresh and what's not, I think it's probably, out of the options we have right now, it's probably the best option. He's bounding off. Son of a gun. So we just hopped right up from where all that crossing was on that river, and we got a couple of parallel trails. There's one right on the edge of that bank. You can see that there's deer traffic moving through all this tall grass in front of us. As we were setting up, we had a little 6-pointer, it looked like. He must have come from the other side of the river, got up here, and then he was 20 yards away from us and obviously saw us moving, and then he didn't really spook hard, he didn't get our wind. He just kind of ran off 40 yards and then kind of, walked, trotted away. There's a lot of good bedding cover out in front of us too. There's one small, pretty fresh rub right here. So it's clear that the deer are using this area. I don't know exactly what the bed to feed is. I can presume where deer are bedding, but I think a lot of what they're feeding on right now, because there's no oaks back here and there's no crops very close, is just a lot of this browse. Expectation is that the best chance of movement is probably somewhere in this wooded area, potentially from that direction, which is toward the tip of the oxbow. So we're a little bit behind the schedule we were yesterday. We got a little over 2 hours left of legal shooting light. So it's it's pretty much almost prime time. Well, pretty uneventful night overall. We didn't get totally skunked, luckily. One mistake we made today was not giving ourselves enough time when going into a new area. So by the time we got in here and it didn't quite look as good as we were hoping, it left limited options and we basically just had to pick the best setup that we could find back here. Didn't really have time to go back and pick out a whole different area. In scenarios like this, it's probably better a lot of times to get into scenarios where you go in and spot check a new place, midday, noon, 1, and then see if you're going to like it or not. And then that way you still have plenty of time to go do a fallback if it's not. Today was a south wind. That was one of the reasons we went into this area. Tomorrow we got a north wind back in the afternoon, so we'll be able to hit a couple of the other spots that we think should be pretty good.